Next up on our tour of SAR's engagements, and arguably the most involved, is the review. So let's begin by looking at the requirements for a review. The mnemonic for the requirements of reviews is you, liar, CPA. So hopefully you're not one. Hopefully no one ever yells that at you. It's a little absurd, but it should help you to remember it. But let me explain what you, liar, CPA stands for. These are the performance requirements for a review engagement. So let's run down the list. You, understanding. You have to have an understanding with your client. We have an engagement letter to do exactly that. L, you have to learn about your client's business. Either you have to learn it or you have to carry in sufficient knowledge about it, or some combination of the two. The I and the A are the kind of bookends of any review engagement, because there are two main types of procedure that we perform: inquiry to appropriate individuals and analytical procedures. That's the I and the A. R is a catch-all for any other procedures required to complete the review. That brings us to CPA, which is the client's letter of representation, then using our professional judgment to evaluate and conclude, and then ultimately we have to issue an report. So that's A for accountant, communicates the results. ULIA, R CPA. You liar CPA. That didn't mean that personally. Anyhow, let's now begin working through in a little more detail each of those elements. So we're going to go right back to the top and start with the U. That's understanding. And as we've seen with other kinds of engagements, that's demonstrated through the engagement letter. So what are some key elements of the understanding that need to be in that engagement letter? What are the objectives of the engagement? What is management's responsibilities? What are the accountant's responsibilities? What are the inherent limitations to a review engagement? Explicitly stating that a review is substantially less in scope than an audit, therefore, we will not express an opinion. It should identify the framework used for financial reporting. It should also include the expected form and content of the review report. Now, as a side note, if you look at this and go, well, that sounds awfully similar to the compilation, it does, because it is. It's not that different. Of course, here we don't have to go the extra bit and say no assurance. It is a review, so there is at least limited assurance being given, but we are not here to express an opinion. So typically, how would an engagement letter be structured? Recognizing as an engagement letter, as a contract, there can be variations. Ultimately, an accounting firm or an accountant can decide to tailor it as they see fit. But typical introductory heading is going to start it out. Then our responsibilities as the CPA, their responsibilities as management, our report, and then any other relevant information. That's a pretty typical structure for a review engagement letter. All right, so let's look at a sample engagement letter. The introduction does a lot of the basics. What's the company? What financial statements? As of what date? And what kind of engagement are we being engaged to perform? In this case, a review. Next, we'll go through our responsibilities as the accountant, including limited assurance as a basis of reporting. This is also where we mention we follow SARS as the rule book for such an engagement, and we are also required to follow the AICPA's Code of Professional Conduct as far as ethics are concerned. Our responsibility will also give a summary overview of what a review is, and it mentions the two big techniques that we use here, those bookend techniques. A review includes primarily applying analytical procedures to your financial data and making inquiries of company management. And then we put in the warning. This is substantially less in scope than an audit, and therefore we are not going to express an opinion. Then it speaks to management responsibilities. It's conducted on the basis that you acknowledge it's your job too, and it goes through a laundry list of things that management's responsible for. Choosing the framework, the accounting principles, ensuring preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements, designing, implementing, and maintaining effective internal control, prevention and detection of fraud, compliance with relevant laws and regulations, making all relevant financial records and related info available to the accountant to complete the engagement, verifying or at least committing to the information being accurate and complete as far as documents, records, explanations, anything like that. Also acknowledging we will give you access to the people you need to talk to as part of your review, and then ultimately you'll provide us with a letter of representation. And then as far as other relevant information, well, one thing that's got to be in here somewhere, the fees. So part of this contract is how much they're going to pay us to do this, and then we get the appropriate signature that would be from both parties to confirm the understanding. And then we may also see a section discussing the particulars of the report. This one specifically states we will issue a written report upon completion of our review with some additional details thereafter. So that takes care of the U in the mnemonic, which is understanding the engagement letter. L is learn or obtain the knowledge needed about the client, their business, and so forth. So expectation here. We should have a working familiarity with the accounting principles as they typically are used in that industry, in the client's industry. Now, you might wonder, well, what if I have never worked on a client in that industry before? Does that preclude me from accepting an engagement? Well, the basic answer is, well, no, as long as you obtain the knowledge necessary. So you may have to do some extra work to get up to speed, maybe take some additional course work, do some continuing education, who knows. The other reason it really has to be this way, what if tomorrow a brand new industry appeared, the very first company ever to exist in that industry? Would anyone have any experience in that industry at that moment? No. So if we weren't able to work, kind of get past that problem, then there would be no accountant who could ever do that work because no one has experience. And that's why it says, no, you're expected to get it or to have it. If you don't have it, you can still work on the engagement as long as you get the knowledge you need. It's important not only to understand the industry and the environment, but also understand our client's business and the accounting principles and standard accounting practices that they've used. We also want to understand the business itself. What are its operating characteristics? What kinds of assets and liabilities and equity does it have on its balance sheet? What are its revenues and its expenses? But in terms of what is required, there are certain things that are absolutely not, because this is not an audit. Testing internal control, performing audit testing, or assessing fraud risk. Certainly those are all relevant, or at least potentially relevant if we choose to test internal control, to an audit engagement, but they are not part of a review engagement. That being said, when I say we are not required to assess fraud risk, that does not mean we willfully ignore evidence of fraud if we come across it. So if we become aware of a fraud or other non-compliance, we certainly have to consider, well, does that have an impact on the review report? And then we ask management, you need to consider whether this impacts your financial statements. Do we have to communicate with a predecessor? So if we are a new accountant taking over for a predecessor that had previously performed the review, that is not a requirement, but we certainly may decide to communicate regarding acceptance of the engagement, and then to discuss any matters of ongoing accounting significance. And then based on the knowledge we've obtained, we now can customize exactly how we want to deploy our two major tools, inquiry and analytical procedures. What that looks like, how those are going to be done, should be based on our understanding of the client's industry, our understanding of the client itself, and the overall level of review risk, right? We acknowledge with any engagement, the part of the risk or the general risk we worry about is, what if we reach the wrong opinion in an audit? Or here it'd be, what if we reach the wrong conclusion? Or truthfully, what if we fail to modify the report when we should? And so that's what we're considering in terms of, well, what kind of inquiry and analytical procedure should we be worried about? We still consider materiality, because materiality is relevant even though we're only performing a review, even though we're only providing that limited or negative assurance. So the mnemonic we use for review engagement requirements is you liar CPA. But we still have quite a few letters to get to, so I'll see you in the next video.